Good morning, everyone. If you could take your seats, please, we're going to get started. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ed McCauley. I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Calgary, and I want to start today's event off in a good way. The University of Calgary is located in the heart of southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je vous souhaite bienvenue à Calgary. I know many of you are visitors to our city, so welcome to Calgary. And also welcome to those who are viewing and watching online. For today's organizing event, I'd like to thank John Chrétien of the G7 Research Group at the University of Toronto and Martha Hall Findlay of the University of Calgary School of Public Policy. John and Martha, could you please stand so we can acknowledge you wherever you are? And I'd also like to thank Denton's Canada, today's presenting sponsor. We have some considerable dignitaries with us today, and I could go through a very, very long list of people to acknowledge, but it'd take up the whole morning. So it's a privilege indeed to welcome back to our campus two former prime ministers, the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien and the Right Honourable Joe Clark. Welcome. And a former Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable John Manley. Welcome to you all. And also a warm welcome to the Honourable Myles McDougall, Alberta's Minister of Advanced Education. Several MLAs, honorary consuls, are all clustered in that table there. And the Mayor of Calgary, Jyoti, Gondek. And I should also acknowledge our Chancellor Emerita, Deborah Yedlin, who's here with us in the audience. Deborah? One of Canadian University's superpowers is the power to convene. And universities play a critical role in facilitating the exchange of ideas on critical issues and at critical times. Whether it's economic security, military security, or once ironclad alliances or energy security, as leaders of the world's largest industrialized democracies gather here in Alberta, they do so at a turbulent time indeed. And the University of Calgary, in cooperation with the University of Toronto, are proud to present a truly impressive collection of Canadian political leaders and experts in a wide topical range of issues. This will also include Alberta Premier, the Honourable Danielle Smith. And I know it will be an in-depth and decisive discussion throughout the day. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. And now I would like to invite the Mayor of Calgary and a University of Calgary proud alum, Jyoti Gondek, to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the City of Calgary, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to the University of Calgary School of Public Policy and the G7 Research Group for organizing this important event today and for bringing together such a remarkable group of leaders, thinkers, and change makers at a consequential moment in time. Let me begin by also offering greetings in the mother languages of the Treaty 7 people. Oki, Daranistara, Ambawastich, and Tansei to all of you. These words remind us that Calgary has long been a place where knowledge sharing and diplomacy have taken root. It is fitting that today's conversation, focused on global cooperation and shared responsibility, is happening on a campus and in a city grounded in those same values, firmly rooted in Indigenous traditions. To all of you, the dignitaries, the academics, the business leaders, the students, and the public servants who are here today, thank you for your participation. Your presence underscores just how vital it is that we tackle today's global challenges collaboratively and with purpose. It's also a special privilege to acknowledge three of Canada's most respected statesmen, the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien, the Right Honourable Joe Clark, and the Honourable John Manley. Your leadership, both domestically and globally, has shaped Canada's voice on the world's arena, and your presence today grounds our work within experience and wisdom. Being back here at the University of Calgary, as Dr. McCauley said, is deeply personal to me. This institution helped to shape me and the way that I think. As a master's student, this was where I tested my thesis that corporations could be socially responsible if we chose to focus on the right kind of leadership as well as triple bottom line performance. And this kicked off a 12-year consulting practice where I was able to work with companies in the energy and land development sectors to make them more sustainable. By 2009, I had become incredibly enamored with this idea of city building, and I returned to this place to gain a better understanding of urban sociology. And that was the time that I began to focus more on sustainability, specifically sustainability of what and for whom. Because there is a tension between the popular three legs of the stool. How does one balance the social, environmental, and economic needs and outcomes that comprise the concept of sustainability? When is it the right time to focus on one over the other, or is it always an even balance that we must achieve? Presently, our global situation is one where this type of balance is becoming incredibly difficult to maintain. And while we seek environmental sustainability and the call for energy transition has been loud, the reality exists that there are nations where energy security is a dream, where entire populations are suffering without things that we take for granted here. This is why decarbonization and emissions reduction are both important, and also why investments in technologies and innovative capture, utilization, and storage solutions are so critical for our future. Think of the difference that we could make in global emissions if we were able to power Asian countries with LNG instead of coal. Meeting global energy demand in a sustainable manner means that we have to focus on all potential energy sources and the investments that are required to be both clean and affordable. And that's an opportunity for Canada. How does our country also show leadership in environmental sustainability and social sustainability? How do we balance the two? What will we do at a moment in time where diversity, equity, and inclusion have become villainized and weaponized? How will we lead with the firm belief that difference of perspective, difference of experience, and difference of approach are actually strengths around a boardroom table or in a municipal council, a provincial legislature, or a federal parliament? Canada must stand firm in amplifying the message and supporting the systems that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. These cannot become dirty words, nor can they simply be boxes that we check. Our future hinges on embracing them as core values, meaning that we must dismantle and rebuild any systems that stand in the way. And while this is a monumental path, it is the only one we can take. Our nation is also poised to be a leader in economic sustainability, but we must face the music that our productivity here in Canada has been in decline for the last 2 decades. And for a country that relies for 2/3 of its GDP to hinge on trade, we have to elevate our game. We need to be investing seriously in infrastructure that increases local production of diverse goods and manages to get them to market in different ways. Canada must be strengthening its inland ports like Calgary and recognize that minimizing supply chain disruptions and creating redundancy in logistics networks relies on diversifying shipping by leveraging air, road, and rail as integrated systems. We must get back to the basics in manufacturing. There's no reason that we should be stymied in our efforts to assemble products because we have been over-reliant on other nations in the past. More local production is critical. If you take solar panels and batteries as an example, we have the petroleum and the critical minerals that are required for both to be sourced right here in Canada. So why are we not also producers of the end product? These are complex and interwoven questions that I trust global leaders are asking themselves right now. And I hope the question of sustainability of what and for whom remains top of mind. There are solutions that can create a more just world. And I hope that those conversations are going to be happening here today as well as in Kananaskis. And I hope that we can spark some great ideas to do the heavy work that lies ahead of us. Calgary is an ideal city for these conversations. We're a place with very deep roots and bold aspirations. Our entrepreneurial spirit, it is early and my words are stumbling. Our entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, and so is our ambition in driving energy transformation, to leading in artificial intelligence and quantum technology, and in offering pragmatic and hopeful solutions to the biggest problems that are facing our world. As the G7 returns to Kananaskis after more than 2 decades, Calgary stands ready to support its mission as a host city and as a global partner. And I'm grateful that new ideas are being shaped right here on the grounds of a university that has been shaping the future for generations. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to join you today, and I hope you enjoy the day ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Gondek. I'd also like to ask the Honourable Myles McDougall, Minister of Advanced Education, another University of Calgary alum, and the former president of the U Calgary Students' Union when he was here, to say a few words. Minister McDougall.
Thank you, Ed, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. As Alberta's newly minted Minister of Advanced Education, it's my great pleasure to welcome the G7 Research Group to our beautiful province, to my hometown, the wonderful city of Calgary. And I should mention my hometown, my adopted hometown, because as I was just discussing with Right Honourable Jean Chrétien, I was born and raised in Sudbury, Ontario. And like many, many people here in Calgary and Alberta, have come from across Canada, moved here for opportunity and the chance to fulfill their dreams here across Canada and around the world. And of course, to my alma mater, the University of Calgary, for this invitational conference ahead of the 2025 G7 Summit in Kananaskis. Thank you to our host, Martha Hall Findlay, and the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy. And I'm honored to be sharing the stage with Dr. McCauley and Mayor Gondek. And I'm pleased to acknowledge the very distinguished assembly of participants for today's event. The Honourable Daniel Smith, who will be here a little later, the Right Honourable Joe Clark, the Right Honourable John Chrétien, and of course the Honourable John Manley. Senator, the Honourable Peter Beam, and the many eminent representatives of government, academia, and industry, as well those from social policy, research, and advisory organizations. It is a great honor for Alberta to once again host the Group of 7 Summit in Kananaskis, which was last held in our province in 2002. The G7 Summit offers an amazing juxtaposition. There's the face-to-face contact among the leaders of 7 of the world's advanced economies and the European Union. The relaxed setting offers intriguing opportunities for an informal meeting of minds at the highest level, often with far-reaching outcomes. And at the same time, the summit involves extensively planned and thoroughly engaged discussion sessions where the business of nations is convened long before the leaders' portion of the summit takes place and continues in countless ways afterwards. And while the changing destination for the G7 is one of the highlights of the gathering every year, there is always the familiar background of global politics, economics, and security. The G7 Summit offers a unique opportunity for exploration of these enduring topics, but also for engagement on other issues of importance in the realms of business, civil society, labor, science, and those relating to women and youth. And no doubt, there will be discussions that reflects current concerns about energy security, artificial intelligence, technology, academic research, and much, much more. Certainly these days, international trade, and a favorite topic of mine, productivity. Constructive discussion depends on having the latest, leading expertise from academia, governments, and business communities. As Alberta's Minister of Advanced Education and one who has studied, lived, and worked in various countries, I know firsthand how vital our post-secondary institutions and communities are to that dialogue. I'm looking forward to gaining an insight today in some of the top priorities of the Kananaskis Summit agenda. On behalf of the Alberta's government, welcome. Enjoy the discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here. It's been a long time coming and planning, and there's an awful lot of work. It's really great to see everybody here and this day actually come into shape. I want to thank Ed McCauley. I'm Martha Hall Findlay, by the way. I want to thank Ed McCauley for the support of the university for the School of Public Policy. It's been a heck of a year and a half, certainly for me, and that support is very much appreciated. I want to thank the G7 Research Group, John Curtin and Madeline Koch and Sally Elliott, who's here. Little anecdote. I'm going to embarrass you, John. I'm dating both of us. I was one of John Curtin's first students in the then brand new international relations program at the University of Toronto. Of course, if I say at that time he had to have been 15, not sure what that means about me, so we'll just leave it there. But John and Madeline and the team have been doing this around the world, and we're really, really thrilled that you're here with us and partnering with us on this conference. I have the immense pleasure of introducing the next two people. When somebody says they need no introduction, the worst thing you can do is actually go on and do an introduction. But the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, Right Honourable Jean Chrétien, is without question one of the most respected Prime Ministers in the history of our country. It was a huge gesture, sir, for you to make the trip out here. We are extremely grateful. Jean Chrétien, as you would know, was the Prime Minister when the G7 was first held at Kananaskis in 2002. And that history, I think you'll start to hear a little bit of in a few minutes. And the Honourable John Manley, former Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance, Minister of pretty much everything, I think. Yeah. These two will come up and have a conversation about G7 and about whatever ends up coming from those two. Please welcome John Manley, Jean Chrétien.
Let's talk about old times, boss. Remember the good old days?
Yes, you did for me what I had to do for Pierre Trudeau.
What was
When
that?
there was a problem, I would turn to you. And he was turning to me. And anyway,
That's not
we
quite
have
the way you
enjoyed
described
public
it the
life.
last
We
time.
have enjoyed it very much. And I congratulate the mayor and the minister and praise everybody who offered their service for public life. You know, I did that for 40 years. And I'm still having fun with it.
How many constituencies did you touch during the recent campaign?
Oh, only 40.
Only 40. So,
But I'm only 91. I would stop when I would be old.
well, I just want to point out to the minister who talked about productivity that here's the key to Canadian productivity. You get 91-year-olds that can go to 40 constituencies in a 4-week period to campaign. You don't have a productivity problem after that.
It's easy. Just keep working.
Yeah, I'm following your lead, sir. We got to talk about the G7, though, at least a little bit. We were talking earlier about some of the history and how this actually started out 50 years ago as a G5. You want to talk a little bit about how this ended up?
Yeah, it started as a G5, and the Italian wanted to join it. And President Ford said, if you want more in Europe, I want Canada with us. And it's the way we became the G7. And I was at my first G7 was in Germany. I was the Minister of Finance. It started as an economic conference, and it turned out to be general politics conference. And eventually that became the main debate about the global political problem that exists and the economy failed. So they split the meetings into, they had a meeting for Minister of Finance before, and the G7 was only for the leader. And I was with Trudeau there in Germany. And
Just to be clear,
just a little
that's Pierre
joke.
Trudeau, right?
Yes. Yes. And you know, there was a picture in the New York Times. There was a few leaders, Trudeau and myself. And they wrote about me, an unknown assistant to the Prime Minister of Canada. It was quite a compliment. So after that, we moved, you know, my first G7 was in Italy, the second one was in Halifax. And it's where we have introduced Russia to the debate. It was at a time when they had decided to quit communism and have a democracy and moving into a, you know, capitalist economy. And everybody wanted to help Yeltsin to achieve his goal. And he was invited for one meeting, the previous one, and I had invited him for all the meetings but one, because when we're discussing the financial help for them, it was better for them not to be there. And that became the G8. And that was the one I had in mind. And for those of you who think, you know, ask the government to do that for you. Because in 1993, I had won all the seats in Nova Scotia. I decided to say thank you to them. And at the election of 1997, to say thank you to them, so I took the G7, that became 8 that day, to Halifax. So they got publicity over the globe. So the citizen of Nova Scotia to say thank you to me for having done that for them. In the election of 97, where I lost all the seats in Nova Scotia. So, you know, for those who say do that to win the next election, be careful. It is not people don't vote to say thank you, they vote for the future. And the problem, we had to make a reform on the UI at that time that was very unpopular in Atlantic Canada. And after that, I presided another G7. It was a G8 at that time here in Kananaskis. And you know, I'd done it to save money because it was extremely expensive. So, but what we realized is the Americans were coming with 1,000 people. And if the Americans with 1,000 people, the Japanese will come with 999. So how, if you move there, you cannot take them. So I called George W. Bush and I said, how come you need 1,000 people to talk with me? So I will admit only 40 representatives per country in Kananaskis. So it was very easy to manage. We didn't have a lot of protests. We had a problem. We had to kill a bear. That was the big story. Yeah. And there was some people mooning. Yes.
Sorry? Were they leaders?
On the road, but not the men. They were mooning the woman. So that was what was the news at that time. It was very peaceful and not too costly and quite a success.
Well, and you know, people won't necessarily realize this, but when you get that many leaders in one place in a city, the motorcades alone tie up the city for hours and hours, and getting people together to meet, it must have been quite a different, a very different experience being in a resort like Kananaskis.
I didn't see anything, you know, but I had been in Calgary many times. I had not to see it again. And because you don't know that, but my mother's side of family arrived in Alberta in 1907. So I have more relatives in Alberta than any of you in the hall here. And they were in St. Paul in the north. So I always had an affection for Alberta, and because of that, I was very pleased to take the G7 here, and it was quite a success, and I'm happy that they selected exactly the same site for this one. So that means that it's a good place to be, and I'm happy to be with you, John, here today.
So very different context. If you think of 1995 in Halifax, you're dealing with the recent collapse of the Soviet Union. There was conflict going on in the Baltic, or in the Balkan states, and there was this emergence of Boris Yeltsin as the elected leader of Russia. Fast forward 8 years to Kananaskis, and we're in the aftermath of 9/11. George W. Bush is preoccupied with security. I think he might have even took a helicopter ride every night to sleep in the United States rather than risking.
It's a rumor. I don't know if it's true.
Okay, maybe so, maybe not.
We were not sleeping in the same bedroom, so.
That would have been strange bedfellows for sure. But it was very much in the context of a security environment. In fact, I think one of the reasons for choosing Kananaskis, because we had started the planning. I was the foreign minister when we were doing the planning. We were going to have it in Ottawa. And we built a building, a purpose-built building, which now houses the Royal Canadian Geographic Society in a beautiful spot overlooking the Ottawa River, which, when you look at it now, you'd say that would have been very vulnerable in a post 9/11 world.
And it's why we decided not to do it there, and I moved it to Kananaskis.
Right. This time, we're in the midst of a lot of global turmoil, conflict in, hot war in Europe, ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and Donald Trump. Now, the last time Donald Trump came to a G8 or G7 meeting in Canada was in Charlevoix. He left describing our Prime Minister as weak and telling his officials not to sign off on the communique. How would you advise Mark Carney to deal with a Donald Trump coming
If
to
he has
Canada?
decided to make a show to be in the news, he will do something crazy. So let him do it. And keep talking normally. It is the way that he handled that when he went to Washington. I was very pleased when Trump talked about Canada to be part of the United States. He just said Canada is not for sale. The White House is not for sale. Buckingham Palace is not for sale. We're not for sale. Trump said, never say never. He didn't even reply. He just moved on with the discussion. Is the way to handle that. He tends to be a bully once in a while. And don't lose your cool when you have a bully in front of you, unless you grab him by the neck, as I had to do one time.
So you gave some advice in your speech at the Liberal Convention to Donald Trump.
Yes, I should. What I said, from an old man to an old man. Stop that nonsense, I think I said. It is, we've been an independent country. The last time they wanted to take over Canada, it was in 1812, if I recall the date. And we burned the White House. So we won't do it this time. And I don't, we had extremely good relation with them, but we're independent. And we refused to join the American Revolution. So there are a lot of people still remember that. We were invited to be there. Franklin spent a year in Montreal trying to convince the Francophone of Lower Canada to join them. And they refused. Why? And it is because especially the Catholic Church at that time felt they were more protected, and the French language too, under the British Crown than they would have been in the United States. Louisiana joined America, and they lost the French language. Quebec of today stayed with Canada and the British Empire, and we went from 45,000 people in 1760 to 9 million today. It's a pretty big success. And we made the right decision, and the Anglophone, the Loyalists, quit the United States to come and establish Ontario and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So it was a deliberate decision by the decision of that day to be a different country than the United States. And I'm convinced will remain like that. So it's why I tell them, shake your head, sir. You know, you would not win that. But we have to work with them. And we have managed to work quite well. For example, take now the car industry. We made a deal in 1964, the Auto Pack, where we had a deal more or less based on you're buying so many cars, so you're entitled to so many jobs. And the industry will adjust to that. And in reality, I don't remember that I answered one question in 10 years I was Prime Minister about the Auto Pack.
You gave them all to me.
But you were paid for that.
But here's a little fact point for today, though. The cars that are assembled in North America, 8% are assembled in Canada. The Canadian population is about 8% of the population of North America. Seems fair.
It's just fair.
Yeah.
And it was the notion that we had used in 1964. And this had worked. We were producing our own cars, so there was not a diversity and the price was high and so on. So we reduced the tariffs and we decided to have a common market with the United States, on cars. And 64, it worked, it's 60 years or more. Yeah. And 61 years, in fact. And it was working. So why to try to break that? And how can you tax a windshield and not tax the bumper? It's going to be, we need a hell of a lot of bureaucrats to go and check that.
Let's go back to these summits.
Good.
Are these all, what's the value of them? I mean, is it all show?
I believe in dialogue. I was there. And if you're 8 around the table or 7 around the table, you don't have the same debate than if you are 40. If you have 40, there is a number where you don't talk anymore. Every leader arrives with a speech prepared by bureaucrats. But if you're 8 or 7, you cannot take a text to read to them. So you have to speak up your mind. And I believe in meeting people. I don't believe in boycotts. Never work. Take today, we have boycotted the Russian a lot. We want to boycott them. But they had last year the greatest growth in Europe, on that continent. They found a way, to go around that all the time. There is always somebody who will supply you if somebody else don't supply it to you, unless it's something that does not exist. And but when you talk, you can find solution. And another advantage is we're all politicians around the table. We don't react as bureaucrat or a big company. We have this preoccupation that what we do will be affecting the people, your standing in the country, even if you have a kind of dictatorship. They know how the others do it, and that put pressure on them. So for me, I enjoy it very much. And in many ways, I think I was useful. I was just talking about an incident here in Kananaskis. We wanted to do something for Africa. I have invited some African leader to Kananaskis, like Carney has done with some other leaders. The object was Africa. We were having a good discussion. But the Americans were in agreement to do something, but they did not want to do it in the context of the G8, or the G8 at that time. It was a hell of a problem, because when you have a meeting like that, you come out of it with a communique that is agreed by everybody. Otherwise, you don't produce anything. So I'd never talk about it. So I was frustrated, because I was to fail in my goal. So I said to Jacques Chirac, the president of France, I will give you the floor at 2 o'clock and suck it to him. You don't tell that to a French president to use word against somebody else. They tend to be skillful about words. So poor Chirac did that too much. And at one time he used, in French, there was translation, a word that is almost Chretien, cheap. When George heard that, bang on the table. My God, it was a hell of a problem. So wait a minute. It is the translator that made a mistake, I said. So everybody laughed, and it was the end of the controversy. And by the end of the day, we had the Americans signing with us. So, you know, because we had the best translator, it was kind of a nonsense for me to say that. But we had to distract, to move somewhere else. This is what Trump is doing these days. He's acting very much in California because he has a problem with his budget in Washington. Distraction, they call it.
Yeah, we never did that.
Never. I was above that.
You built some really close relationships with several of the leaders, and I mean, lots of people have talked and written about your relationship with Bill Clinton, with Jacques Chirac, with others. You want to talk about how that all transpired?
But, as I said, we're all in politics. And Clinton wrote about me, I'm sorry to talk about me, but Chretien, the Canadian will never know how influential he was, because he claimed that I was the one who knew most about governance. It is a written text, not me, and than anybody else, and you will never know the influence he had. Because I had the advantage that I had been minister 20 years before, plus I was I was 30 years in the cabinet. I'd been minister like you of many, many departments. So it was apparently showing. And as we are not we should not try to get out and look big. We have to be modest, as Canadians tend to be, and play a useful role and not brag about it. So you build a lot of confidence with these people. And just in the problem of Ukraine today, Canada played a big role and nobody knows about it. They had a big problem, Chernobyl. We needed to build a sarcophage over that because, of the danger of the pollution, nuclear pollution and so on. And I was carrying the file on behalf of the Ukrainian because it was in Ukraine. Chernobyl was not in Russia. And I was carrying the file, and eventually the countries of the G7 paid billions of dollars, including Canada, our share, to build a sarcophage. But every summit I will come with that file. That was a Canadian file. But, it was difficult. We succeeded, and I don't think many people in Canada knows about it. And it's not needed, in a way, because to be effective when you're not a big shot is to be low-key, useful to everybody. And it was easy for me, to do that.
Yeah, I've turned that into something I've kind of quoted you on, which you can deny if you want, but Canada's success is by being the useful country.
Absolutely.
And when you think back to, recent history, under John Diefenbaker, we fed the Chinese during their famines. Then we were among the first with France to recognize China in the 1960s. We were always able to talk to the Soviets. We were always there. We had posts which were giving us information in places that the United States was not able to go, including the work that became famous under Prime Minister Clark in Iran, when we were, because of our positioning there, we were able to effectively obtain the release of some Americans that could have been in very deep trouble. We've been the useful country without being the showiest country.
It's what I tried to be when I was I may had 10 G11, G7, G8 in my career, and I tended to be useful, and we can be, to be the bridge, when there is problems and so on. It's why I believe I don't like boycotting, because you don't talk anymore. It's not popular to say that, but I had quite good relation with the Russian. Why? Is because I went in Siberia in 1971. I was Minister of Northern Affairs. And they had Siberia, so we were comparing notes and so on. And I always been going there and welcome, and, and they are very somewhat their land, their resources. They have the biggest land in the world. So they have the same type of daily problems than we had. And, I was comfortable with them. And now we don't talk. And we don't talk with the Chinese. Lecturing others, it's not the way. I never done it. It might be good news back home, but it's bad news, in doing the job. And
so you used to get pressure, though. I remember those when I was foreign minister. Why isn't Chretien telling the Chinese to, respect human rights or to?
Yes, I was doing that all the time. But one day I was pressured in a corner. I was in New Brunswick, and I was very tired. And I was in a little room and depressed. Monsieur Prime Minister, you're going to China. Will you tell this and tell that to them, blah, blah, blah. I said, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute. You want me, Jean Chrétien, Prime Minister of a country of 35 million people, to tell the President of China what to do. But don't tell the Premier of Saskatchewan what to do. Mind your goddamn business, you will tell me. We have to be a bit consistent, So that's why I had no other question.
That'll do it, yeah. So you may then, on that theme, think that Mr. Carney's invitation to Prime Minister Modi is a good idea.
It's always good to talk. We have problems, of that nature. Are they intervening? And, there's problem internally with them that they have to manage. And, and we do. You remember for years, CBC International, what were we doing with that? We were broadcasting all the countries what to do within their country. You remember that? Yep. You should have democracy. You should do this and do that. And we felt good about it. So there is always some communication that is not desired. But I don't think that if the Chinese have helped 3, 4, 10 MP to be elected, that would have affected a lot of the fate of the Canadian government. You have to put that in perspective. It's unpleasant. It's unacceptable. But it's not major. And you have to navigate. You cannot always go on your high horse for every little problem you're confronted with. I would not.
So I think the invitation to Mr. Modi.
So that's a good one. They will be able to talk, and they will see there are other problems, and they will become a very important country. What is the reality we're facing? Is we're living probably a great revolution. We never know that we're doing that. But the power, international influence of the Americans is going down, necessarily these days. So they will not be what they were. And China is emerging. And they have the people and the resources and the intelligence, and they're moving fast, much faster than expected. So they will be very big. And we have a complementary economy with them. We have the land, we have the resources, we have great agricultures and so on. So we can be very useful to them. But we're buying, some say, too much from them. But the problem is you talk about productivity. You know, one day I had a debate with the president of China. And I was complaining because we had a trade deficit. So he said to me, Prime Minister at that time, he said, you know, for a pair of Nike shoe made in China that you buy for $100, how much of it stays in China? 5. But if the Nike shoes were made in Canada, you will pay $135 for the pair. So with the system we have, you have with $135, you have a pair of shoes plus $35 to spend in the Canadian economy. The $100 that you pay for, we have 5. What is the rest? Transportation, design, publicity, Tiger Wood, you know, the retailer, the wholesaler profit, so on. It's all within our economy. So we don't realize that. And in terms of productivity, we have a pair of shoes, another $35 to spend in your economy. We don't think in those days, in those terms. And it was working well. Now, globalization has been a great success. Why? Because we have taken millions and millions of people out of poverty. When you look at international statistics, you know that starving people, you know, the number has gone very low compared. People not going to school ever, you know, it has virtually disappeared. You know, it's not, they are still poor, but they are not the same type of poverty than it was before. We made progress. But in politics, it's always a big problem. I started in 1956 as president of the Young Liberal at Laval University. Not many of you were born. And so I watched politics. I got elected. I was 29 in 63. So politics has been my life. I never got up in the morning with a big title, big headlines. Canada had a good day yesterday. We must have had at least one. But a bad news is a news. A good news is not a news. In fact, apparently some guys in California try one day to have a newspaper with only good news. They had only one bad news, they went bankrupt. It's not a news. So we're always confronted with problems, and you know that. And I said sometimes, to fill a hole, you have to dig 2 more. So you're shoveling all the time. But you develop good muscle in doing that. I did that for 40 years. And you did that for some. Joe Clark, that will be with you, this was more than 30 years in the House of Commons with me. He was the opposition. I used to say, the opposition are the opponents. your enemies are behind you. They want your job.
Of course, in that
No, I don't want to get into that.
in
Keep
the
it
great
something
British,
else.
the great British satire, yes, minister, they said, actually, no, it's not like that at all. The party on the other side in the House of Commons is the government in waiting. The opposition is the civil service. So
That's another problem.
that's another problem. But I'm still interested in how the dynamics in this meeting that is coming up are going to work. I mean, whether Donald Trump puts on a show or not, we're the legacy of just the last couple of months of his leadership with tariffs and trade wars, dismantling the global trading system, destabilizing NATO. These are really fundamental changes.
Yes,
And
and you
so
cannot
what does
take-
Mark Carney want to do with
You know,
this?
the problem is to build a big factory take years, costs a lot of money, and they don't have much unemployment. Where they will get the people to fill these jobs? And the manufacturing type of job, they are disappearing. You know, it's all automated all the way. And the level of employees have not the blue collars that would like, who were working in the automobile industry, say in Michigan and all these type of states who have diminished. They have not diminished. They have diminished because of technology, not only because of trade. And as you say, you know, we buy 9% and we produce 9% of the industry. So there is no problem there. And I think that they are completely mistaken and they lie. You know, who is paying the tariffs? It is the American consumer, not us. They buy something from us. So they charge money, for example, to potash. You know, who is paying the difference? It is the farmer. And if we wanted to be nasty, we should stop to sell them potash. That will be tough. Because you have to understand that all the states who are very much for the Republican tend to be the states where they have a lot southern, you know, farming type of industry, Kansas and all that type of, who are extremely Republican. All the farmers tend to be 70% in favor of the Republican, if not 80. And that will be hurting them very much. But it's not the way to grow forward. It is just creating more problems. So, and I can see that is getting very difficult with that. You know, there is a wall that he's facing. And you know, they call him, what is his unique name now? He says Taco. I don't know what that means, but everybody laughs when we say that. Because a taco, en français du Québec rural, c'est un vieux char, it's an old car. We say he has a taco, c'est-à-dire un maudit vieux char, a very old car. En français, I mean. En anglais, that means that you change your mind all the time. You back down all the time.
So you think he's going to back down? So what do we do, wait him out?
We have no choice. You know, we have to.
Well, but it looks like, you know, if you look at how Carney has framed what he hopes to accomplish in this meeting, he starts with peace and security, and then he goes to energy security, and then he talks about building new partnerships and relationships to strengthen Canada and to attract talent and to build our networks around the world. It sounds like he's saying the U.S. will be whatever the U.S. is. We've got our own work to do here, and here are the categories that I'm working on.
Yes, it might be a great opportunity for us. But probably if we had it a bit too easy. You know, we had the American market at our disposition. You know, we're selling a hell of a lot to them. And sometimes they stop us. You know, when Trudeau gave the permission for a pipeline going to Texas, it is the American who blocked it. And when he paid $30 billion to buy the pipeline from here to Vancouver, he got help from all the native group and all the environmentalists. He never had thank you here for that. And, you know, and it's not even, so, you know, we're selling more oil today than we ever sold. And the people talk as if we were in misery. You know, there's always a solution. So he is right, you know, talking security, you know, the big problem is we'd have to do everything to avoid war. And sometimes we don't do that. And that's good, we have to talk about it. You know, the war in Iraq, I said no, you remember. And it was done for nothing. And it turned out to be a disaster. The war between Ukraine and Russia is leading nowhere. And, you know, and it could have been avoided. But, you know, I talked with Putin about that myself. I visited him one day, and we were to have a coffee for 15 minutes, and he kept me for an hour and a half. When I was a lawyer, I went for Denton's, by the way, it's my law firm, so, you know, I have to say that is very important. And that is, you know, and we discussed that. And basically, the impression I had is for him to have Ukraine, Belarus, and Georgia part of NATO. It was too close for comfort. You know, to have American soldier 300 miles from Moscow, it was not more comfortable for him than the Americans have Russians in Cuba type of problem. And I discussed that for an hour and a half. And I think there was a solution, but, you know, I was not there, and, you know, it took a bad turn. We even discussed with him the possibility of Russia to join Europe, so there would be no need for NATO, and he was buying that. And suddenly, we dropped the ball. So he turned to the Chinese, and he made a deal with them. So imagine having Russia being part of Europe with all the resources and so on. That would have been a bloc that would have been quite strong. And it didn't happen. I discussed that with him, with Schroeder, and with Chirac. You know, when we were in St. Petersburg for the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg, his hometown. So there's a lot of potential when you talk. This was an idea that went nowhere, but it could have gone somewhere.
So next week, the G7 in Kananaskis will be history. What should Mark Carney consider to have been a success?
Well, you know, it will be a success just to have it. I think he selected the real subject that had needed to be discussed. And they will probably come out quite united. The only problem is it's completely imprevisible. We cannot forecast what the President of the United States will do. Depend on the mood. They need to be in the news. It's not based on the fundamental problem. And, you know, everybody will tell him that he is on the wrong track. To close down, to make, you know, everything in America like they did after the First World War. Right. You know, Wilson had managed to create the Society of Nations, and the American Congress blocked it. And because Wilson, he had international views, and the American wanted to close down on them. And they tend to do that. They went to war, you know, way long after we were there. They came because they were attacked by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. It was 2 years in the war. They were happy to make money selling armament to everybody. They became very rich and they bankrupt the British Empire. That is story. So I think that he's handling that very well, and we're very lucky at this time because his CV is very impressive. He's been governor of the Bank of Canada and in England. You know, when you think for anybody to see a guy who was Prime Minister of Canada, who is born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, educated in Edmonton, and the Brits come to take on during Brexit to run their bank, people think he must have some qualities.
Well, you and I hired him,
Of course.
so he must have had some qualities.
Oh, I knew his father.
There you go.
You know, when I was Minister of Northern Affairs, I was visiting Fort Smith. And he was in the education at that time. And you know, you will be surprised, nobody talks about it. He was a Liberal candidate in Edmonton. He chose a good year, it's the year that Joe Clark was elected to run as a Liberal in Edmonton. The odds were not very good. And I made a speech for him and I was not effective. He lost.
Nobody lost to an MP named Doug Roach,
Who became,
he was an MP who showed up at Mark Carney's launch to say he was supporting him.
and I think he was a Tory and I named him Senator.
Could well be.
You know, I was like that. Once in a while I would do things like that.
More than once in a while, as I recall.
And he was an MP, he was very preoccupied by, if I recall, security. He was very much involved in international politics and very knowledgeable about it. He was respected as an MP, and so we use him in the Senate.
And apparently he respects Mark Carney. We've only got a minute left. I mean, what's your final thought about this G7 summit and how it's going to unfold?
I think it's an occasion to make Canada appreciated. I think that the people who are coming there will see that the agenda is good. I expect that it will be quite successful unless there is a show. But we have to forget about the show. What will be the result is that, you know, we have to stop that nonsense of breaking away and trying to be all a little country producing everything. It won't work. It's better to be working with everybody. If somebody is better to do something and cheaper, we should do that. And we should find a specialty for us. And in Canada, we have everything going for us. We have the energy, we have the resources, we have the land. You know, we're doing quite well. The problem is, as I said earlier, you know, we don't talk like that. You know, we're in good shape. We have the lowest per capita debt of the G7. We have the lowest deficit per capita of the G7. You know, we don't have a big problem with unemployment. In fact, we're lacking manpower. And everybody wants to come to Canada. You know, it's not long ago there was another survey and around the globe, and they were asking the people, if you had to start your life again, where would you like to go? Canada is still the number one top of the list. It's why when I was making speeches, I will all finish with that, you know, we're the land of opportunity, land of generosity, of sharing, and, you know, and all the qualities we have, trust, we don't have ghettos and so on, and I will finish Vive Canada, you know. And you know, and people will tell me about me, I had no vision. So I wanted Canada to be the best in the world, and I had no vision. Imagine if I had a vision.
Well, you know, I'm going to throw it to Martha got the hook out. But of course, I'm very proud to have been part of your
Of
government.
my team,
your
and I'm
team.
very proud to have you in my team.
And you know, when I think back to those 10 years, there's some big things that we did. I mean, we took the worst, second to Italy, I guess, second worst deficit in the G7, G8, and brought it to the best. We avoided
Paid
the
the debt.
calamity in Iraq. You brought in the Clarity Bill, despite the opposition of much of your cabinet. You found a consensus of one and prevailed with it. But you did really big things. But the most prevailing thing, and in light of recent times, I think it's important to remember this. While you were Prime Minister, you may not have got too many headlines that said Canada had a good day yesterday, but Canadians felt good.
It is you know, political leadership is to make the people feel good. When you feel good, you go to the store, you buy things, you take your kids to some place. If you feel bad, you're afraid, you stay home.
Yeah.
So it is to create a good mood, and with all we have in Canada, to create a good mood for Canada is good. You know, and you know, the Clarity Act, you were there. Everybody was opposed. But, you know, I hope that the people here will read it. When you have a divorce, there is two parties to a divorce. And, you know, and now it's a good sign. Look at what happened in Quebec. Now they realize, with the debate with the United States, how lucky they are to be in Canada. And you see that in the polls and so on. You know, the popularity of Canada is much higher in Quebec than it was a few years ago. And, you know, because we have to offer the best, the trust, the generosity that I always talk. We are rich, we're not poor. And, you know, here, start to be positive. You know, why to be negative? You make yourself unhappy. And if you say we're doing fine, you know, we don't live in misery in Canada. We have problems that have to be solved. But, you know, compared to anybody else, we're doing better. And Canada of 1963 and the Canada of 2025 is not the same. And I was associated to the progress and the development of that. And I'm very proud to be a Canadian.
Vive le Canada.